Waking up early in the morning, he made another meal for Lysandra before pulling out a map that was generated by Shiro's Argus system. Let's see, where are the Southern Isles from here? Considering the fact that they had to evacuate with everyone, it shouldn't be that far from the Vatican, though there may be a teleport shrine nearby that I don't know about. Ian muttered while navigating the map. The last report didn't exactly give us a coordinate, so we're still in the dark in regards to their position. While they would probably keep a shrine prepared just in case, it's very likely that its existence was only revealed in a state of emergency. Lysandra suggested, as Ian agreed. True. I wonder if the Argus system can search for teleport shrines. They may be hard to spot from space, but their mana signatures should be linking to one another, forming a web of mana that wraps the world. Attempting to adjust the search parameters, Ian tried to search for the teleport shrines, but her lack of knowledge around the Argus system was displayed as she only zoomed in and out of the map. Furrowing her brows in frustration, she was surprised to see a notification on the Argus system from Nantion. Are you looking for something? I happened to notice that you were doing nothing but zooming in and out of the map for the last 10 minutes. Nantion. Typing a response back, Ian asked for a bit of help as she didn't know how to adjust the search parameters. All right, I'll get that sorted for you. If you want, I can also scan for clumps of signatures underground. That way you can get a rough idea of where they are. Nantion. Thanking Nantion, Ian waited for a moment before the information popped up on her interface. Man, he's getting really good at using Mum's nanobots. Ian scratched her head while checking the map, seeing that there were quite a few teleport shrines nearby that was hidden within man-made mountains. Ian understood that Lysandra's theory was correct and that they were shrines used in situations of emergency. To the far, far south, there was a cluster of human signatures along with a mix of other races. Key thing to note was that they were surrounded by monsters, with one having the aura of a queen. Well, I suppose we should rush there before anything bad happens. Sis, will you be able to hold on? Ian asked with a serious face as Lysandra nodded her head. Transforming into a phoenix, Ian placed Lysandra on her back as she tore open the rift and flew towards the south, hoping that she would get there in time. ####. Who the F***ck do they think I am? When I had found out that they were living nearby, I did not persecute them. No. Instead, I offered them help, gave them food, and helped drive the monsters away so that they could live in peace, since they did not want to come under my rule. RNGS. However, these ungrateful F***ers actually sent a party of invaders to come to MY City, to raid MY supplies, to kill MY subordinates, then dare to complain that I'm in the wrong. Drive them into a corner, take away everything they hold dear, then slaughter them like pigs. Morin shouted out in anger. She couldn't believe that her help was actually repaid in such a manner. Seeing their fearful faces as the monsters approached their location, cornering them off at every turn, Morin had no remorse in what she was about to do. Stop! I thought we had an agreement. One of the paladins shouted out while parrying an attack from a monster. None of the attacks were meant to take lives just yet, as Morin wanted to corner them more. That agreement was broken long ago by people of your side. If you want forgiveness, then sure. Drag those bastards out and kill them in front of me. You know we can't do that, with the world as it is. It's imperative that we have to stick together. You don't know if they were forced or not. This decision is rash. **T. It's especially in these times that the bad need to be weeded out, especially those that are willing to do rash things for selfish reasons and endanger your entire group. Did I not lend you my aid? Did I not spare you what food I could? Offer you protection? I didn't even force you to come under my rule and allowed you to live safety on the Isle, but for what? For you to tell me to forgive two rats that decide to put everyone at risk? There is no more talking to be done today. Either you give me their cold, dead corpses, or everyone can go with them. I will not suffer the ridicule of letting worms like you trample over my kindness. Morin shouted back as her aura flared. Morin LVL 900 Queen of Quakes. Slamming her hand down, the water around the islands erupted as the land itself was torn apart. Flicking her finger up, everyone on the island lost their footing as the paladin gritted his teeth in anger. While they would not be affected by the earthquakes, the same couldn't be said for the civilians. We can still talk about this. There's no need to go that far. Aren't your subordinates still alive? Hearing this, a vein bulged up as everyone felt suffocated by Morin's killing intent. Had the medics not reached them in time, do you think we'll still be able to revive them? You're more foolish than I thought. The time for talk had long passed. I had hoped that you'll make the smart choice, but it seems like I'm mistaken. Morin shook her head as she raised her arm. Her mana flared as she prepared to slam it down once more, but something grabbed her wrist, widening her eyes. Morin glanced back in shock as she didn't sense the other party at all. Pulling open the rift, Een popped her head out. Ahem, I didn't hear much, but it would be awfully inconvenient should they die on me. Perhaps we can strike a bargain? Een forced a smile as she was just in time to hear the stupid reasoning the paladin gave them. Sure, her subordinates was alive, but to pick such a sore topic out of all things, it was surprising that the queen didn't kill them sooner. Who are you? Morin asked as she was in a contest of strength against Een. Een was holding her spell back, while she was still trying to kill the survivors of the Vatican City. It'll be easier if you've been to a few of the events that the system had set for the queens. Perhaps you're familiar with my mother's crest. Een smiled as she pulled out a carving of Shiro's crest from the rift. Feeling a cold chill down her spine, Morin furrowed her brows and stopped casting her spell. Gesturing with her spare hand for her subordinates to stand down, Morin took a deep breath and signed. Can I presume that you're the daughter of Shiro? The mythical phoenix that consumes everything? Morin asked as all of her subordinates froze up in shock. Bahaha, seems like I'm also quite famous. But you got one thing wrong. I can't consume everything. I wish I did though. But setting that aside, how about we sit down and have a nice chat? I would love to know more about what had transpired, and if I can offer a solution without killing them, that would be fantastic. Een grinned as Morin glared at the survivors before nodding her head. Very well, I shall prepare the venue. In the meantime, feel free to browse my city to your leisure. My subordinates will seek you out once a fitting venue has been prepared. Now, if you'll excuse me, they will be set under observation, but you can interact with them however you wish. Morin bowed respectfully before teleporting away, smiling at her response. Een brought Lysandra out of the rift and made her way towards the survivors. Seeing the wings behind Lysandra, who was sitting on the wheelchair, most of the civilians who couldn't hear the conversation started to kneel down and prayed to themselves while Een and Lysandra ignored them. As for the knights and paladins, they looked at the two of them with weariness, but a few recognized them from a while ago, as they spent quite a while in the Vatican City without Shiro. However, within the myriad of gazes, there was one that stood out to Lysandra, a gaze that was filled with turbulent emotions, one that seemed to recognize her condition. Following the gaze, Lysandra could see that it belonged to an armored elf who seemed to hold a rather high position within paladins. This was not the same person who was conversing with Morin earlier, as that young man was standing next to the elf respectfully. Whispering something to Een, Lysandra kept her eye on the elf as Een started to approach them with Lysandra. Standing in front of the elf, Een narrowed her eyes. What's with your gaze, HM? Seems like you know something the others don't. Een smirked as he furrowed his brows. I sense his energy on you. Did he break the taboo again? He asked, but Lysandra shook her head. No, he did not break the taboo. He's still locked within the library. But if I may, can I ask you how I can solve my condition? I'm assuming you're one of the very few who know about what happened with angels and fallen. Lysandra asked as the elf's eyes shook for a moment. Let us talk elsewhere. This information should not be shared with people who shouldn't know. He sighed before Een opened a portal to the void. Sir Ardorius, are you sure you must speak of this alone with them? The young paladin asked with a concerned look as Ardorius nodded. This is something youngsters like you shouldn't know. Without saying anything else, he stepped through the portal, leaving everyone speechless. Doubt filled the air, but Een ignored it, entering the portal with Lysandra before closing it. Now that they were in a private space, Ardorius sighed heavily and kneeled before the two of them. First of all, I must thank you for giving us some time and a chance to talk things out with the Queen. I will forever remember this favor. However, I cannot share with you the knowledge I have. I was there when the taboo was broken. I cannot, with good conscience, let a remnant of the Vatican's dark history remain. I don't know how long you have left to live, but I'm sorry. Miss Lysandra, I witnessed your arrival in the Vatican several months ago. Had you asked me back then, I might have told you considering the fact that you were still uncorrupted. However, now that you are already falling to the darkness, I cannot help you. Ardorius bowed his head and apologized. He could feel his body screaming for him to run away as he could sense Yin's anger rising with every word he said. Even if I wanted to tell you, I had already burned down every single document that might have helped you. When the world changed, I had to make sure none of the records were dashed. Before he could finish his sentence, he widened his eyes as Yin's hand was in front of his face, inches away from tearing his head off. Her wrathful gaze could be seen as her hand was barely being held back by Lysandra, who forced herself to stop Een. Feeling pain shoot through her body, Lysandra's face paled as she collapsed on the ground. Quickly catching Lysandra, Een felt conflicted. What are you doing? Why did you stop me? You know he can't provide us with anything that's helpful. Why did you strain yourself like this? Ian asked as she helped Lysandra back on the wheelchair. It's not his fault, and you know it. He had to burn it down to stop the spread of disaster. You know what happened in the documents. He was only making sure things didn't repeat. It was never meant to stop me. Lysandra smiled weakly as Ian healed her to the best of her abilities. Biting her lip, Ian took a deep breath and glared at Ardorius. What can you tell us then? Anything would do. Ian asked as Ardorius shook his head. The only one who can tell you anything right now is Azrael. However, he is now bound by oath and cannot say anything even if he wanted to. Ardorius admitted as Ian took a deep breath and sighed. There is a way though, she said ominously as both Ardorius and Lysandra were confused. Mum's nanobots. She kept a skill library which make custom weapons for people who want a certain skill. Somewhere in that skill library should be something similar to her soul reading ability. I'm sure if we ask Nantion, he'll help us read his soul to find a way for you to survive. Ian said as she narrowed her eyes at Ardorius. Furrowing her brows, Lysandra thought about the possibility. Hearing this, Ardorius widened his eyes and pulled out his blade. I can only hope that you'll help the others, he said before attempting to end his life. However, before he could, the darkness in the rift locked his body in place, stopping him from doing anything. New yes. My domain, my rules. We're taking you back. Ian narrowed her eyes. I suggest you don't. I had a feeling that he wouldn't know about it, but I didn't think you would go to such lengths. If you forcefully read his memory, you'll also break a rule that'll do more harm than good. Azrael. Ardorius widened his eyes. Besides Lysandra, a glowing sparrow appeared and landed on her shoulder. I used what power I could help your sister while also making sure things went well. Had he knew about the ritual, I would have not said anything as I would be breaking a rule of my own oath. But since he doesn't know, it fulfills part of the requirements for me to give you some information. In days of old, there was a ritual that you could perform with the highest-ranked paladin at the time, the Pope and high-ranking clerics. This ritual would allow you a chance at divine intervention from God. With my perception of the world, I'm guessing that gods are able to influence this world some more, so you can probably just do the ritual with the paladin and the Pope. If the Pope is not available, I should be able to help somewhat, though the chance of success is smaller. Azrael admitted as Ian looked at Ardorius, then Azrael. What do I have to do then? I doubt you're telling me this for you to do it for free. I assume you want me to talk to the Queen to let these people go. Ian said as the sparrow nodded its head. That would be most helpful. Paladin, I don't know your name, but I suggest you follow the instructions I give for the ritual once they've helped everyone. I know you don't want the past to repeat, but there are always exceptions. Plus, this may help me clear my name of my sins. After being locked up for so long and seeing how much danger is in the world for everyone, I want to do more than to look after a library. Perhaps God may give me a second chance if I help these two youngsters. Azrael chuckled as he started to fade. Once I gather more strength, I will send a familiar. For now, I do hope that you too can help these people survive this ordeal. However, if the ones who have committed the sin are beyond salvation in life, then I hope they'll find salvation in death with the embrace of God. Hearing this, Ian nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Watching the moat disappear, Ian looked at Ardorius. I'm keeping my eye on you. Behave yourself while we talk to the Queen. Opening the portal, Ian left with Lysandra. Looking up at the darkness in the sky, Ardorius sighed and stabbed the sword into the ground. Kneeling in front of the sword, he started to silently pray. #####. Upon leaving the portal, Ian was greeted with hostile glares by the surviving paladins and the knights. Where is Sir Ardorius? The young paladin shouted out as Ian rolled her eyes. He's still alive, just praying right now. We have come to an agreement. I help you guys out, and he helps us out. But first of all, I want you to show me to the guys who were responsible for raiding the city and killing the Queen's subordinates. Ian said. The paladins frowned. However, understanding that these people must have lost a few brain cells from all the fighting, she looked at the citizens. We're not going to be killing those responsible if possible. We just need them to come with us so that the discussion with the Queen can go smoother. Plus, even if you don't tell me who they are, the Queen will have her ways of singling them out. If you tell me now, it'll make everything a bit easier. If not, then I'll certainly remember your choices. Ian narrowed her eyes. A commotion started to spread through the crowd as the paladin wanted to say something. However, before he could, Yin's killing intent caused his body to freeze up, stopping him from saying anything. After a few moments, the crowd started to back away from a group of people with pale faces. They started to panic. I'll double-check your identities with the Queen once we get there. If you aren't the right ones, then it'll be a real shame, Een said as she swept them up in a prison of shadows. Throwing the culprits into a separate area within the rift, Een made her way to the city with Lysandra. Entering the city, Een got bored of exploring rather quickly as Asharia had everything and more. Most of the things here were lackluster. The quality of items being sold were also rather poor, as most of the experienced crafters are either dead or elsewhere. Considering how the Queen had spared the civilians from the Vatican initially, Een could guess that she wasn't a tyrant, so getting manpower would be rather difficult. It was a surprise that a queen like this even survived for this long. Scanning the city with her senses, Een had a map of the city in her mind. Compared to trying to remember everything in Asharia, this was easy. Sitting down on the balcony in one of the restaurants, Een glanced at the city while Lysandra was next to her. Say, sis, I have a weird thought bugging my mind for a while, and I want your input, Een said as Lysandra glanced up. Once everything is over, what would Mum do? What would her purpose be? I've been with her the longest aside from Lyrica. Her goal has always been revenge. The thought of protecting everything came later. But what do you think she'll do once everything is over? Once she got revenge, and once she protected everyone, what would become of Asharia, the world, the people from Asharia? Een asked as Lysandra thought about it for a moment. I can't help but think Mum would be lost. She tries to get a hobby, but she always gives up on it for fighting. You can't really call experimenting her hobby, since she's using it to help her fight better. I think Mum might snap, once everything is over. Nothing to fight. No need to act as a protector. She'll be bored out her mind and snap. And here's where my weird thought comes in. Een glanced at Lysandra with seriousness. Do you think Mum would be happier dying once everything is over? Not that I want her to die, of course, but I can't help but worry about her mental state. I don't know. I agree with you on that. Mum would be lost. Though I think it shouldn't go as extreme as thinking would she be happier with dying. Rather, it would be better to help her find more things worth going for. Let's say if Helion and Madison were to have children and their children have grandchildren, I'm pretty sure Mum would want to watch over them and keep them safe with Madison. Same goes for anyone she cares about. That's just how she is. If anything, she places the burden on herself, but at the same time, she enjoys that. She gets joy from seeing the people she cares about being happy. But most importantly, I think it should be something we think about once the time comes rather than now. Lysandra shrugged as he nodded with a grin. So good to have you around. Without you, big sis might keep thinking of depressing topics. Een laughed as she leaned back on her chair. Hugging Lysandra and making sure she didn't hurt her, Een flicked her finger and swung wide the door with her mana before the subordinate could even knock. Lead us to her. It took you long enough, Een said as the subordinate nodded his head and bowed, gesturing for them to follow him out. They made their way to the main castle in the heart of the city. To be honest, Een didn't even need them to show her the way, since she could sense where most of their manpower was being gathered. While her senses may not be as outrageous as Shiro's, she could still easily sense everything going on in a tiny city like this one. Arriving at the castle, they were led to a giant room with a large table in the center. Standing by the table was Morin, who was nervous inside, as she wasn't too keen on dealing with Een and Lysandra. If things don't go well, she hopes that most of them would be spared. Seeing how nervous Morin was, Een decided to not bully the queen, or else Lysandra would be unhappy. Waving her hand, a cage appeared with the supposed culprits. Can I assume that these were the ones who killed your men? Een asked as Morin glanced at the group locked up, unable to do anything. Glancing back at her subordinates, they nodded their heads with hatred in their eyes. Yes, they are. May I ask what you plan to do with them? Morin asked as she gestured for Een to sit down. Only when Een sit down did Morin follow, as Een was the dominant party in this discussion. Well, I wanted us to discuss what we could do for you to pardon these guys. Of course, I'm not trying to bully you here, but we do need the people of the Vatican to be alive. These bad apples, however, can be punished depending on the severity of their crimes, Een said as she crossed legs and narrowed her eyes. So far, they have broken into the city, killed 5 guards, and raided one of our supply warehouses. While they didn't burn things down, most of the food was destroyed, with them taking what they needed. It's already hard enough to feed everyone in the city considering what's going on outside of the city, and now these people have broke into one of the larger food warehouses. If we want to keep emergency supplies, we'll need to start rationing our food more than we have before, Morin said as Een thought about it before glancing at the group. Is that so? It is of my personal belief that bad apples like this should be disposed of quickly before more harm is done. However, my mother does like to give second chances, so I have a suggestion that may be beneficial for both parties. Of course, I'm not pressuring you here. Because between you and me, I don't really care about the lives of these people. The other citizens are a different question, but for these criminals, no mercy. However, before my sister lectures me, I do want to avoid some bloodshed, so let's discuss a way to please both you and the Vatican refugees. Ian clapped her hand with a smile. I assume that you'll let bygones be bygones should they die, right? Nodding her head, Morin wondered where Ian was taking this. So what if, let's say, they were to become your slaves for a time? You can send them on missions to procure twice the amount of food they have stolen and damaged, and once they do, they're free. Of course, sending them on obviously suicidal missions is a no, but should they die of accidental deaths, then it's on them rather than you. They get to live and be free if they do their job. You get the food they stole, and the Vaticans are happy. What do you think? Ian offered as Morin thought for a moment and glanced at her subordinates. While they were unhappy that their killers were allowed to live, they knew that killing them wouldn't change anything. Leaning over, one of the subordinates whispered into her ear as Morin nodded her head. That is acceptable. We'll take these people as temporary slaves until they finish gathering twice the amount of food they have taken and damaged. Once this is done, we'll free them. I am willing to activate a contract to ensure that both parties hold their word, Morin said as Ian smiled. Perfect. Nice and simple. Ian grinned. Before she could write up a contract, Lysandra nudged Ian. Raising her eyebrow, Ian received a text from Lysandra. Reading the text, Ian thought about it for a moment before nodding her head. All right. By the suggestion of my sister, and on my authority as the leader of the food hall in Asharia, we'll compensate you for the food they have taken and more so that your city does not need to ration due to their damages. Naturally, this is free of charge. We'll even enlist some of our adventurers in the city to collect food for your city, provided that there is payment for their jobs. We'll cover a portion of the cost using Asharia adventurer laws, but you still need to pay 70%. That way, food shortages should no longer be a problem for you while it also gives our adventurers more work. What do you think about this? Should you agree? We'll build a branch of the Asharia Adventurers Guild within this city and open a teleport hall to allow our adventurers free travel between cities. Should your citizens apply for a permit, they are allowed to enter Asharia through the teleport hall and explore the city. Since my mother does not want to kill queens if possible, opening a partnership between our two cities should be beneficial for you, as a queen with a personality like yours is a rarity in this age. Ian offered with a smile. While Ian was saying this, Lysandra had sent Nantion the info, and he quickly drafted up a contract for them. As for the alliance part of the contract, that could be done once Shiro was back. Reading through everything, Morin was a little hesitant. Can you give me 2 days to think about this? She asked, as it was a little too good to be true. Of course, take your time. My main priority has been dealt with anyways. Ian smiled, gesturing to the slaves. Fulfilling the first agreement for Morin to forgive the Vatican people, Ian and Lysandra left the building so that they could consider the offer from Asharia. Leaving the building, Ian created a portal into the rift and stepped through with Lysandra by her side. You still praying? Ian called out as Ardorius was still kneeling in front of his sword. What we're about to do is practically breaking the taboo. I must seek forgiveness first before performing the act. Ardorius replied without looking up. Keeping his eyes closed, he continued to pray. Is that so? Well, that's up to you. But we've come to an agreement with the queen. The ones who are guilty for all of this will serve as slaves for the queen, doing missions until they've collected enough food to compensate the city. In return, she'll let bygones be bygones. Congrats. Your people can continue to live, and the ones responsible aren't killed either. Ian said as she stretched her body. Thank you. If you want to thank me, help my sister. Your thanks won't do anything for me. Helping her will. Ian replied instantly as she sat down, waiting for Azrael to contact them since he was the only one who knew how to do the ritual. I understand. Heis, I will give you my full cooperation. Ardorius sighed as he was going against everything he had done so far. If he was being honest, this left a bitter taste in his mouth. However, if God really accepts what they're about to do, who was he to go against the will of God? Finishing off his prayer, he sat silently and waited for Azrael's arrival. After waiting for around an hour, a mote of golden light appeared in the void and transformed into a sparrow. I have built up enough strength to go through with this ritual. Once we're out of the void, I shall lead us to a place suitable for this ritual, Azrael said as he nodded her head. Flicking her fingers, a portal opened up as the 4 of them left the rift. Carrying Lysandra with mana, Ian followed behind Azrael while Ardorius did the same. Flying over the refugee camp with all of the Vatican survivors, Ardorius activated a spell and send a message to the young paladin, notifying him of what the decision was and what they were doing now, asking him to lead the refugees back to the base. He also mentioned for him to not interfere with what happens next. Seeing this happen, In only raised an eyebrow but paid no attention as her focus was on Lysandra's survival. Flying across the ocean, Azrael suddenly stopped as the city and islands were barely visible across the horizon. This should be the place. Paladin, charge my familiar with your mana, and I'll start the ritual. Then I need you to listen carefully to what I say and repeat after me. Azrael said as the sparrow started to transform. Letting out a ray of light, he revealed his form. He had long black hair that reached his lower back, a black and gold robe that was designed in a similar fashion to the Pope's robes, dark gold-plated armor around his shoulders, arms, waist, and legs. Behind him, 3 pairs of black wings could be seen, followed by hundreds of illusionary wings overlapping the real ones. Raising his arm, he opened his mouth and chanted in a language unknown to Ian and Lysandra. Asterisk, boom. Parting the clouds, a sword shot down from the skies and hovered in front of him. Grabbing the sword, Azrael closed his eyes and glanced at Ardorius. Listen well, Paladin. Stabbing the sword down, a giant Tier 6 magic circle started to appear in the bottom of the ocean as Azrael started to chant. Copying what Azrael was saying, Ardorius used his own sword as a conduit, causing a second Tier 6 magic circle to appear before overlapping the initial one that Azrael created. Asterisk rumble. Watching the ocean water boil and swirl, Azrael's figure seemed to overlap Ardorius as they both raised their sword into the air and cleaved down. Asterisk bang. Splitting the ocean in two, a giant golden ring of energy appeared in the sky. Glancing up, Ian recognized it to be Tier 7 in nature. Heavenly Father, show your lost lamb the path to salvation. Show us the path to that of which we seek. Forgive us for our past sins and shine upon us a new dawn. On the authority of Azrael, the angel of death, I summon Scala ad Selim. Both Azrael and Ardorius shouted out at the same time. Suddenly, from the bottom of the ocean, a white and gold temple started to appear as the world seemed to freeze around them. The temple seemed to be made from a strange material that was completely crafted out of energy. There was a single path leading to the temple as the gates opened ever so slightly. I suggest your sister walk the path alone. That gives her the highest chance of success. Azrael smiled as both Ian and Lysandra could tell that he was exhausted. We 3 shall wait here. Should your prayers be answered, you will be saved, and I will be forgiven. Should your prayers be rejected, then nothing will change. Nodding her head, Lysandra took a deep breath and looked over at Ian. I'll be right back. She smiled as she forced herself to stand up. Furrowing her brows, Lysandra activated a berserk skill so that she no longer felt the pain in her body. Diving down, Lysandra flew to the start of the path as a show of respect before walking towards the temple. Feeling a warm energy wrap around her body, she could see the darkness in her wings fade by a tiny bit. Stepping forward, her motions were slow but her speed was fast. In no time at all, she arrived at the gates of this temple. Feeling a strange, unfamiliar energy on the other side of that door, Lysandra glanced back at Ian before taking her first step in. Asterisk bang. The gates closed behind her as Lysandra suddenly found herself in the middle of the sky. A sea of clouds surrounded her as there was a single path in front of her, a stairway that continued up to the unknown. Taking the first step, Lysandra felt the energy within her body change ever so slightly. Taking another step, the sensation persisted. Losing herself for a moment, Lysandra realized she had taken hundreds of steps and her body had physically aged. Around her, statues of angels could be seen, guarding the side of the steps. Furrowing her brows, she wanted to look back, but something in her mind told her that she shouldn't. As she continued up the stairway, her body grew old, died, then was reborn and grew old once more. Ignoring the changes to her body, Lysandra continued up the staircase, not knowing that the power of destruction started to run rampant. The seal that Beelzebub had placed on her was destroyed, and her wings crumbled to ash. Her arms started to break away, but she didn't stop. As her leg crumbled to dust, both radiant and dark energy wrapped around one another to form a new leg for her to continue her steps. Little by little, she lost her physical form until she was nothing but energy. By the time she knew what was going on, Lysandra found herself in the middle of a galaxy. In front of her, a single being floated in the star-lit void. Tell me, child, what form of mind do you see? A voice rang in her head as Lysandra tried to reply, but no words came out of her mouth. Instead, an echo could be heard in the galaxy. Your form is that of a faceless being. White energy is your hair, and your body fades into the galaxy. Your clothes are the sea of stars weaved into a fabric. Is that so? A rather odd form, I must say, though not the first. Those that had seen me have observed a myriad of forms. An old man, a twisted cosmic horror, a ball of energy, darkness with two eyes. What are you? By my understanding of gods, a single biblical god should not be possible. The powers described within the books do not match the system standard. So what are you? Lysandra asked, even though she didn't want to ask such a thing. It seemed that all her thoughts were laid bare. Straight to the point, I see. Though as the daughter of the firstborn of destruction, it is only to be expected. I am God, though it is not what you think. I have all the power while also having no power. I know all, yet I am ignorant. Though perhaps this would be easier for you to comprehend. I am the God of faith, belief, and prayers. I am the being that grants an answer to prayers and beliefs to mortals. My power comes from what they believe I can do. If they believe wholeheartedly that I can help, then my power grows. If they do not believe I am real, then my existence fades. I am all-powerful, so long as people believe me to be. But I cannot overcome what they cannot comprehend. My powers are limited to mortal comprehension. If they cannot comprehend the might of the firstborns, then I am a speck in front of their infinite power. I know of all that happened in the past, but I do not know what will happen tomorrow. However, my divinity over faith allows mortals to seek answers in other ways not originating from me. Therefore, I ask you, child of the destroyer, where do you place your faith? My mother, the firstborn of destruction. She will forever have my unwavering faith. However, allowing myself to be corrupted by destruction would bring ruin. Even she does not want her powers of destruction to run rampant. Therefore, I must seek out the forces of creation, do I not? Nay, who is to say that destruction is corruption? The calm, gentle embrace of darkness and the sharp, blinding rays of light. Is that not your mother and the goddess Arya? Who is to say that darkness is evil and light is good? All that matters is where your faith is placed. Who is to say that allowing yourself to darkness causes you to become evil and destroy everything? It's all about faith, child. Faith in yourself, faith in your powers. If you believe that you'll become evil, then that will be the natural result. Do you believe that your mother is evil? No. Then you have your answer. I cannot overcome what you cannot comprehend. But as you already have the answer, then all that matters is for me to lead you to the solution. I'm not all-powerful, but I can show you the path. Without saying anything else, God waved his hand, and the energy around them started to flow towards Lysandra. Closing her eyes, Lysandra thought back to Shiro. She is the firstborn of destruction, but she seeks peace more than anyone else. As her daughter, I will help my mother reach her goal. Like her, I will destroy those that seek to break peace and welcome those who wish for peace. Suddenly, the space collapsed around Lysandra as all of the energy swirled towards her, reforging her physical body. Your faith in your mother is truly unwavering. God smiled as the energy started to calm down. Standing in the middle of the galaxy, Lysandra reappeared. Her long white hair fluttered behind her as she wore a full set of angelic armor that was dyed the deepest black. Unfurling behind her, 3 pairs of void black wings appeared as black energy swirled around her body. Destruction energy that threatened to reduce everything to ash but was somehow docile and calm. Do you have a name? Lysandra asked as she opened her mouth. Nay, I need no name. I am merely one who guides, an invisible force in the universe that interferes occasionally. Tell Azrael that his bindings are of his own making. Should he forgive himself and seek to do good, they will naturally release him. He chuckled, waving his hand. Lysandra felt a force pull her away from this area. However, just before she was gone, Lysandra managed to catch a glimpse of his tag. Strangely, there was no name, no class, no level. He was simply the god of faith. By the time she opened her eyes again, Lysandra found herself outside, floating above the sea. Looking down, she realized the world had returned to normal and no longer frozen in time. As for the temple, it had now disappeared. Een, Ardorius, and Azrael floated over to her, as Een immediately hugged Lysandra, while Ardorius was on guard since Lysandra's wings had turned completely black. I'm back, sis. Everything was sorted out. Lysandra smiled as she hugged Een back. That's good. As long as you're okay, then that's good. Een smiled as she hugged Lysandra tightly. Even though she wasn't being verbal about it, She felt a crushing pressure in her heart, seeing Lysandra not being able to move without the help of the wheelchair, especially when she thought that there was no hope left. However, now that she was standing here nice and healthy, Ian felt a weight being lifted off her shoulders. Once Lysandra realized that Ian wasn't going to stop hugging her for a while, she chuckled and looked over at Ardorius, who still had his guard up. "Don't worry, I didn't lose myself to corruption or anything like that. I just had my eyes opened by God. And Azrael, I must say, God is a lot different than I had thought." Lysandra smiled as Azrael chuckled. "Indeed, he is unlike the gods you see from the Greek or Norse pantheons. Speaking of which, he did say something about your bindings. Your bindings are of your own making. Should you forgive yourself and seek to do good, they will naturally release you." Lysandra smiled. Hearing this, Azrael paused. "They're of my own making?" he asked, as he could clearly remember the day when these chains bound him to the library. "Amen. So long as your heart and faith are in the right place, you will be free. It's all about belief." "I see." Looking up at the sky for a moment, Azrael closed his eyes and prayed silently before opening his mouth. "Then I shall remain in my bindings for a little longer. I believe that mortals can support themselves. While it may get hard and obstacles may block their path, I believe that they can venture forth with unwavering determination. It will be tested time and time again, but mortals will push on. They may take a step back or stumble, but they will never stop. I will release myself when mortals need an extra support," Azrael said as he looked back at Lysandra. "It is through trial and tribulation that the mortal will is tempered. Me coming out and shielding them now would be akin to me giving up on my belief in that they are strong, that they can venture forth without me. Then I hope to see you when things take a turn for the worst, when the heavens crash down and gods walk amongst man, and when man becomes nothing but a speck. I hope you will help shield them for a period. Naturally, wanting them to grow through tribulation is not the same as refusing to protect them. When the time comes, I will serve and I will protect." Azrael bowed respectfully before his figure disintegrated into motes of light. "Now then, what about you?" Lysandra asked as she turned to Ardorius, who had now sheathed his sword. "I will keep doing my job and keep the people safe," Ardorius said as Lysandra nodded her head. "How about you work with the Queen and form an alliance with us? We can talk about some benefits that Asharia will give while allowing you safety. With how things will be, I doubt you'd want to go back to the Vatican right now, so your best bet is to stick with the Queen. I will remind you that a queen like her is rare, so you should treasure this chance. I will bring this up to the others and see what they say." Ardorius bowed before flying back to the refugee camp. ####. After that, we eventually managed to come to an agreement between Ardorius and Morin. She'll allow the Vatican refugees to live under her protection so long as they help out the city. They've also signed a contract with Morin similar to our contract, where we send adventurers for work and they get paid. It's generally to allow Morin's city to flourish, Lysandra explained with a sparkle in her eye. Listening carefully, Shiro smiled and patted her head while eating the noodles that Ian made. "I see. How did they fare during the transition?" "It should have lasted a short while since I slowed down the transition, but it must have been rather hectic," Shiro asked curiously. "Me and Ian dealt with that. We decided to remain for a bit to make sure everything is okay. So right now, Morin is just waiting to finish the contract with you, and that'll be them sorted out for a while." Lysandra smiled. "Amen. Good job. I'm proud of you both. And I must say, I'm rather surprised that the biblical God does exist. Honestly, I thought he was going to be something similar to Nyx and the others." Shiro shrugged. "But enough about me and Ian. What did Mum do while we're away?" Lysandra asked curiously. "Not much. Met two interesting people. Met up with Arnia, killed the final shard of a god, brought her to Asharia so that we can work on saving her sister, recruited the remaining subordinates of a queen, and found out some information about anima. And as you can see, obtain a bunch of subjects perfect for experimenting." Shiro waved her hand casually while Yin's smile twitched, but eventually waved her hand dismissively. It wasn't anything crazy, just a Tuesday for Shiro, so she shouldn't make a big deal out of it. "So, Mum, who was that girl who attacked you?" She certainly felt different from everyone else in this world. Her aura is foreign. If we weren't looking at her, we wouldn't have even known she was there. It was like her aura was completely out of our perception. Ian asked while grabbing more food since she was still hungry. "If I knew, I would tell you. But unfortunately, I can only say she's from the creation side of the universe. Strangely adept to nanotech and wants to kill me." Her line was strange though. "The world would be better without me or you. I'm the lifeline right now, so without me there will be no world." Shiro shrugged. She speaks as though she's the firstborn of creation. You think that's the case? Nantian mentioned as Shiro shook her head. Nah, not likely. If she was, she would have killed me rather quickly. Plus, the burning sensation in my body feels more like it's from someone who wields creation rather than the literal being of creation energy. Think of it like this. Lysandra using destruction energy is pretty much the opposite of that woman. Just because she can use it doesn't mean she's the firstborn of creation. The divinity is lacking. Whereas if I was to use it, it would obviously obliterate anything and everything I touch. Because, well, I'm the firstborn of creation. Shiro explained. Now here's what I think. We know that the other side of the universe is pretty much an inverse of ours. I'm guessing she could be a flipped version of me or someone close who can use nanotech. With what I mentioned earlier, the chances of her being a flipped me is significantly higher than being someone close. Shiro scratched her head. But we cannot scratch out that she is indeed the firstborn of creation since you two are basically sisters considering your identity. Nantian reminded as Shiro agreed. In a nutshell, we know F***ck all, and all we can do now is to experiment and figure out how we can access their world like how they can with ours. Shiro said as she leaned back before flinching from the foreign nanobots in her body. Oh hell no. There is no experimenting until I sort your body the F***ck out. Nimue cut in as she appeared next to Shiro, staring at her glare. Shiro understood that she must be rather furious. Well, who said I was going to be the one to provide the mana? Thanks to the little agreement I have with Jormungandr, I can just use the mana and divine energy he provides to experiment while I let my body rest. Shiro waved her hand as Nimue took a deep breath in anger. Wanting to say something, she eventually sighed and disappeared back into Shiro's mana realm. You should give her a break sometime, Mom. You know it must be stressful doing Nimue's job. Lysandra chuckled as Shiro nodded her head. I will, darling, I will. But not right now. Shiro grinned. But where's your brother? I know what you and your sister have been up to, but what about your brother? Oh, Addie's doing something with stupid lizards and fire. Something along the lines of hell and stuff. I didn't listen properly since I lost interest after he mentioned the lizards, but Cyrodiil might know since Addie talked to her for a period of time. Ian said as Shiro raised an eyebrow and nodded her head. Well, I'll ask once I rest for a day. I think this fight took more out of me than expected. Shiro chuckled as she finished her meal. Talking to the others for a little longer, Shiro made her way back to her room. Before entering, she sensed Nantian coming around the corner. Shiro, he called out. Was something up? Shiro asked as he furrowed his brows, but shook his head. Or perhaps you wanted to sleep in the same bed again. Shiro grinned as he rolled his eyes. How are you feeling? Is your body okay? He asked as Shiro nodded her head. Don't worry. I'm fine. Just a bit tired, though. Shiro waved her hand. I'll wake up in a few hours to experiment. If I don't wake up by then, give my door a knock, okay? Shiro said as Nantian opened his mouth. Hesitating for a moment, he nodded his head. Rest well. Watching Nantian leave, Shiro sighed and opened her door. Locking her door, she laid down a set of runes before collapsing on her bed. Gritting her teeth, she held her body while trying to not let out a cry. I already warned you during the dinner, but you insisted on talking more. Nimue frowned as she had been constantly repairing Shiro's body from the inside this entire time, while Shiro made it seem as though there was nothing wrong. Unable to reply, Shiro held her body in a fetal position as her fingers dug into her arms, drawing blood from how much strength she was using. Shaking her head, Nimue transformed herself into multiple streams of water that coated the wounds that continued to open across Shiro's body. The nanobots within her that were dormant, running rampant once more before being suppressed by her mana. You should sort out these nanobots first, or else I'm forcefully purging them from your body. Nimue warned. Don't. They're an important clue that we need. If I can figure them out, we can start making progress. Shiro squeezed out before letting out a small cry of pain. Meanwhile, Nantian leaned against the walls outside of her room. Closing his eyes, he sighed heavily. If she didn't sense me here, then she's probably at her limit. She was already acting weird during the dinner. Nantian thought to himself, understanding that it was probably done by the creation energy within her body. He figured that she must feel as though everything within her was melting away. Taking a deep breath, Nantian wanted to go in, but understood that with Shiro's personality, she wouldn't want anyone to see her like this. If that wasn't the case, why would she choose to sleep over experimenting? Flexing his arms, the armor made from the Radiant Knights wrapped around his arms once more. As they were made from nanobots, there wasn't much trouble for him to control them. Unlike Shiro, he wasn't that far into the destruction element, so there was only a slight burning sensation, nothing more. Dismissing the gauntlets, he made his way to the labs. Opening the doors, he was surprised to see Aram standing there, reading the documents on the subjects they've just acquired. During dinner, he had written a small document, so he didn't expect Aram to read them already. How's Shiro? Ian and Lysandra told me that something was wrong with her, but they weren't sure. They mentioned something about experiments and thought that I could probably help. Aram said while chewing on a mana stick. Not good. I can't give you a detailed description since I wasn't able to get a good look, but from what I could tell, her seal on the creation nanobots are probably getting destroyed, forcing her to make new seals. During the period when she's making new seals, they'll be killing her from the inside. Nan Tian said as he summoned the Radiant Knight armor and placed it on the table. Sitting down, a new console appeared in front of him as nanotech arms held the armor upright. That bad, huh? I had hoped that Shiro would have been more open to us, but I suppose she doesn't want us to worry, Aram said while cracking her neck. Pulling out some research of her own, she sat down near Nantian. How many hours do we have? Minimum of 4 hours. As for maximum, hard to say. Nantian shrugged. 4 hours, huh? Well, since it's Shiro, let's half it to 2. She would probably get a better seal sorted out and be back on her feet in 2 hours. From what I've heard, she placed the seal hastily after the battle, so this one should be better and last longer, Aram said as she flicked her fingers and a giant magic array appeared in the room. This is the compiled research that I have on the other side. If you use it as reference against that armor of yours, we can probably make some connections. If we're lucky, I can use my mage tower as a portal to the other side. Aram smiled before flicking over a mana stick. Catching it, Nantian threw it in his mouth and smiled. Either that, or we help her find a clue on how to obtain creation. But knowing Shiro, she might just jump into the deep end. Regardless, we got 2 hours to do as much as we can so that she can have an easier time. 2 hours real time yet, but our time, not so much. Aram laughed before tapping her finger on the table. Runes lit up on the walls as they radiated a familiar emerald glow. Time magic. Nantian raised his eyebrows. Not what you think. I glanced at some details regarding the training rooms that Shiro had made. I just made some adjustments with my knowledge of space magic, and this is a refined prototype. The time dilation is weaker than the rooms that she has, but it's more stable and portable. If I want to make more improvements, I'll need her since she's the only one with knowledge on time magic. Aram shrugged before using magic to create a holographic clock. With the time dilation, we have around 20 hours give or take. A little better than 2 hours, is it not? Aram smirked, chuckling for a moment. He nodded his head, and the two of them started their research. ####. Laying on her bed while covered with sweat, Shiro took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Collapsed on the ground was Nimue, who had been in full focus for a little over 2 hours now. Sorry about this, Shiro muttered quietly. Don't think too much. If you're sorry about it, stop making me work my ass off like this. Nimue chuckled as she climbed onto the bed and laid down next to Shiro. Though I kind of signed myself up for this, haha. Oh, if only I knew what I was agreeing to. Nimue smirked, causing Shiro to laugh softly. Do you regret it? Nah, it's a little annoying and exhausting. But regret it? Not ever. Also, you should probably take a shower. You are covered in sweat. Nimue shrugged as Shiro nodded her head. I'll tone down the experimenting if I can. Thankfully, I don't need to use my mana since Jormungandr is providing us with everything we need. Shiro sat up and made her way to the showers. That's a relief for me. Now if you'll excuse me, I actually need to sleep. Fixing wounds caused by creation energy is rather exhausting, Nimue said as she transformed into a stream of water that entered Shiro's body. Just as Nimue disappeared, circuits appeared on Shiro's shoulder. A small piece stood up on her shoulder and rubbed against Shiro's cheek. Of course I can't forget about you, Error. Thanks for helping us. Shiro chuckled. Mother's body is very weak right now. Your power remains the same, but you can't take any hits or else the seal will break. I don't know how long it'll last for, but I'll maintain it as best as I can. Error said within her mind. Amen. I'm counting on you. Disappearing from her shoulder, Error went back to her mana realm and concentrated on the seal, since it was in a rather delicate state right now. Even with everything at their disposal, there was simply too much that was unknown about creation energy. The seal was at best considered a band-aid solution. I should read more on Isvelger's notes. Shiro muttered with a small smile before having a shower to refresh herself. Once she's done with this, she'll need to deal with the test subjects, Nantion's new armor, and the nanobots within her. After her shower, Shiro dressed herself in some casual clothes which consisted of a black dress, white jacket, black tights, and a pair of boots. Compared to her usual outfit, This was something she would probably wear on a day out. Drying her hair, she tied it into a ponytail before making her way to the labs. Let's see, where are the labs again? Shiro muttered. After making the main tower of Asharia, she created several labs for experimentation on foreign elements, such as the crystal. For something like these nanobots and the radiant knights, she would use one of the better labs that she had created. Sending out her senses, she noticed that one of them seemed to have a barrier around it, stopping her perception from entering. Ohaya. Closing her eyes, she activated Analysis EX and realized that the barrier was also speeding up time within the lab. It was similar to the training rooms that she had made, but more stable. Realizing that it must have been Aram since she was the only one with the talents in space magic to stabilize her training rooms, Shiro wondered what they were doing inside the lab to warrant such a barrier. Looking deeper, she sensed both Nantion and Aram experimenting on portals and the armor he had brought back. Realizing that they must have started without her, Shiro chuckled and made her way over. Just as she approached, the lab doors opened up. "How was your rest?" Aram asked as she gestured for Shiro to come in. "Relaxing, though it seems like you two have started without me. Kinda makes me sad, you know." Shiro joked as she watched the doors close. Waving her hand, she summoned Iriel and snapped her fingers. Jormungandr's crest appeared on the blade as green runes lit up, upgrading room so that time moved a little bit faster. Now that she had Jormungandr's help in regards to mana, the time dilation was now roughly 1 to 36. 1 hour in here was equal to 1.5 days outside. But that was an estimate since even with Aram's help, her control over time was still lacking. The actual dilation would fluctuate with 1.5 days being a generous estimate. "Do you have any new discoveries that I should know of before we start?" Shiro asked with a smile. "Somewhat. We tried to see if we could track a signal back to its source through one of Aram's portal, but the connection was cut. Either they made some changes on their side, or it's a bit harder to establish a connection than we expected," Nantion said as he moved away from armor that he was experimenting on. "Since nanobots naturally receive a signal from a controller, it should have provided us a way to reach them. But it seems like these nanobots work a little differently. While they still receive a signal, it seems like they have their own AI as well. For example, if I cut my connection with the armor and do something like this." Standing next to Shiro, Nantion created a barrier before having the robotic arms place some nanobots in front of the armor. Suddenly, the armor changed color as the blue glow between the plates turned red, transforming itself into a writhing mass of metal. The armor attacked the nanobot samples before trying to breach the barrier. Quickly re-establishing connection with the armor, Nantion froze it in its current form. "As you can see, once I release my connection, they attack anything and everything, especially things with a stronger connection to you. But that's only the case when I use something weaker. Once we use a stronger sample than the armor, it backs down and enters a defensive form to protect itself while trying to send a signal to the source. The AI is there, but less developed than one would think. If anything, it's similar to a child who's hostile against anything weaker than it while fearing something stronger. I don't know about the other subjects that you've captured, but the ones fused together to make the armor are undeveloped," Nantion said as Shiro observed with slight interest. I see. Well, I can make AI as well, but it's more of a program than actual AI. Making an AI, I think, and learn is a lot harder than many would think. It's not a matter of trial and error that makes them grow. Even if the outcome makes them feel like AI, real artificial intelligence actually have free will. It's very difficult to pull off, and even back in Aria, where they made nanobots, there was only one proper AI, while others are advanced programs that follow a giant library of instructions. As for this suit of armor, I'd say it's more of a program that attacks everything it's coded to attack. If I was to let's say coat this sword with error and have him mask the feeling of creation, it shouldn't attack it," Shiro said as she controlled the nanobots through a tablet and made a sword. Holding the sword, circuits appeared on her arm and wrapped around the blade, dyeing it completely black with red circuits. Gesturing for Nantion to release his control for a moment, Shiro approached the suit of armor. Throwing the blade that's simulating creation energy, the armor did not attack it despite being made from destruction nanobots. Instead, it allowed it to do whatever while still trying to attack everything else. If it was a proper AI, the reaction would be different, but as you can see, that's not the case. Retrieving error from the blade, the armor immediately attacked the sword that now lacked the aura of creation. If it was a proper AI, it would have been confused rather than attack it if it was undeveloped. Shiro shrugged. However, there's a benefit to this. Since it's only a program, Error can give me a proper scan of it. Flicking her wrist, a strand of circuits shot out and started to override the armor. The nanobots tried to fight back, but were suppressed quickly as Error already had experience in fighting against them thanks to the ones within Shiro's body. While Error deals with them, shall we look at the other subjects? Shiro asked with a smile. Nodding their heads, they watched her pull out 10 orbs. Throwing one into a makeshift prison, Shiro chained it us and had Error disable its processes for now. Limping over, the knight was no different from a dead person, but she knew that the moment she undid its bindings it would most likely kill her, especially in her current state. Let's throw it onto an operation table for now. I want to observe what it's made from and how the nanobots work inside their body. Hopefully it should give me a rough idea on how to achieve the creation variant of the nanobots. Shiro shrugged as Nantion nodded his head, giving her a hand. He hauled the knight onto the table and pinned the limbs down through shackles made from the armor. They knew that destruction nanobots won't work against them, so the best way would be to use the creation nanobots. Cutting the knight open with a blade, Shiro started to dig around while its regeneration was being hindered by Error. Furrowing her brows, Shiro felt something off but couldn't quite put a finger on it. Pulling out a few samples, she placed it into a small container before activating Analysis EX. Focusing her gaze onto the sample, she zoomed in as much as she could so that she could observe each individual nanobot on its own and see how they were made. While she was observing the nanobots, Aram was still trying to establish a one-way connection from their side, and Nantion was observing the overall composition of the knight. Its body was made from a strange, tangible energy that was cool to the touch, but was strangely soft. It was as though it was a water balloon, yet it felt almost impossible for him to pop. The wings on their back was made from the same energy with the armor protecting the soft body. The F***CK, Shiro suddenly muttered as the two turned their attention towards her. Before they could even ask what's wrong, Shiro displayed a hologram of what she was seeing. You know what? I'll retract my previous statement of them being programs. They're not. They're not even AI. They're actual beings just merged with a ridiculous amount of nanobots. All that remain are their mana. Each knight is made up of thousands of people, I suppose. Think of them being thrown into a blender so that they can be used for their mana. Their flesh served as a catalyst for the nanobots to multiply. They're not undeveloped AI or programs. There's simply too many voices with one main voice dominating them. Without that voice commanding them, they can only follow their last order. Suppressing her anger, Shiro pulled out a familiar lantern. This suit of armor is a cage for thousands of souls that are burned to power it. The creation energy within the armor render the souls to pure mana, which completely counters my destruction energy. If I was to remake my lantern from nanobots, capture thousands of souls, and forcefully forge it into a body, I would essentially make one of these knights. Tapping her fingers on the table, Shiro glanced over at the other knights that she had captured. Taking a deep breath, she flexed her finger, releasing all of them into cages before looking at her lantern. Iriel, I know what you're going to ask. I'll salvage what I can, but I'll be honest with you. All of them have practically fused into one mass of energy to power the suit. Even if I was to recover part of them, their souls are incomplete. If they reincarnate, their soul will probably be used for monsters. Iriel sighed as Shiro stayed silent. Is it truly so hopeless? I'm sure there are some ways we can help. I mean, my soul was broken, but it's recovered somewhat. Anima is still shattered, but mine I suppose I fixed. Yes, but that's only because the other shards of your soul were mostly undamaged. Even if it was damaged, your identity as Anima gave you extra benefits. Unless you can find undamaged pieces for these souls, I doubt you can do it. Thinking about it, Shiro had an idea. The idea itself could be achievable, but it was somewhat doubtful considering the feat that they would need to accomplish. However, that had never stopped Shiro before, so it shouldn't stop her now. Aram, Shiro called out as Aram turned her attention towards Shiro, who now had this glint in her eyes. Yes. How exactly does your spell save and load work again? I think I know what you're going for, but unfortunately, I've never saved their previous state, so I cannot help them. Aram sighed. Yes, but what if there is a way for you to see their previous state? This might be improbable, but with error, I am able to read their source code. If you demonstrate the skill to me enough times, I might be able to pinpoint which code you are saving and loading for your spell. If we can pair the two together, there's a good chance for us to help them. I mean, it might be doable, but you need to keep in mind that this is already a very experimental spell. While it has gone through extensive testing, it's still rather unstable as I am tampering with something I cannot see. My save and load works with what I see rather than the code. Or at least that's how it is to my knowledge. Using your method could help them, but we would need to test it first, Aram said, as she didn't want to test a new spell on people who couldn't say no. I know. I'm just putting it out there as an option. I doubt many of them would want to reincarnate into monsters. But setting aside the idea of helping them for now, we still need to test your skill. What if I were to bring some items until you are comfortable enough with your skill? Once that's done, we can do some trial runs on minor injuries and scale upwards, Shiro offered. Thinking about it, Shiro asked Nantion to get some items while she checks on the nanobots within the armor. She had a candidate for human testing, but that's only if she was to say yes. Hearing her request, Nantion nodded his head and went to fetch a few items that were broken when Shiro had destructive energy swirling around her body. Since they weren't completely destroyed, fixing them should be possible. And if they could fix things damaged by destruction energy, souls shouldn't be too difficult. Of course, he wasn't going to neglect obtaining normal items too, since they need to test it with a wider variety of items. While Nantion went off to grab a few items, Shiro started to remove the souls from the armor. That way she can test the nanobots without harming any of the souls. Transforming Error into a small blade, Shiro activated Analysis EX. With Error enhancing her eyes, she delicately separated the soul from the armor. It was rather difficult considering the fact that cutting it off from the nanobots does cause it some harm too, since the nanobots were helping the souls maintain their shape in a clump to act as fuel. Without this, they'll scatter and break, which is the opposite of what she wanted. Thankfully, she had a perfect container on hand that didn't absorb them like the armors. Stabbing Iriel through the top of the lantern, Shiro allowed him to have some control while she placed the souls inside. That way he could round them all up and make sure they're not deteriorating. Once the souls were separated from the armor, all of the energy within the armor disappeared, leaving just the nanobots. It lay lifeless in the cage, but Shiro wasn't about to uncage them since the nanobots from the creation side were still aggressive to her even without the souls. Instead, it was now acting upon instinct, attacking whatever was in its way. Once she sealed it up and locked it in the cage, it was now more docile. She wanted to compare it with her normal nanobots, but there was a slight problem. She didn't know what parts of the nanobots changed due to her nature as the firstborn of destruction. She knew that the nanobots wouldn't be this powerful had it not been for that. Thankfully, there was a way, but it required turning someone else into a Snowmancer. She could implant a certain type of nanobot within their body, transforming their physique in order to allow their mana to turn into nanobots. The moment she brought this up to Aram suggested that Shiro try it in her since she can use save and load afterwards to revert herself back to her prior state. After a bit of persuasion, Shiro agreed. Should I make it so that the nanobots enhance you more? Shiro asked since it could benefit her, but Aram shook her head. Thanks for the offer, but I'll pass. Nanobots don't exactly suit me, so I'll stay with what I have right now. Aram chuckled. Sitting down, she took off her jacket, exposing her back so that Shiro could begin the transplant. Nodding her head, Shiro stood behind her and placed her hand against Aram's back. Focusing her mind, she channeled a small portion of Jormungandr's mana through her body and transformed it into nanobots. Cutting a small hole in Aram's back, she inserted it into her body, causing Aram to tense up for a moment as she attuned to the nanobot. Try to make a sample now and revert yourself just in case the system makes it permanent, Shiro reminded as Aram nodded her head. Furrowing her brows, she aimed her hand at the table and focused hard. Since nanobots only work with a clear blueprint, it was a bit difficult for her to make a decent sample quickly. But since she created the spell that converted mana into mana sticks to improve focus, she essentially created a nanotech mana stick that had no other purpose other than aesthetic since everything was metal. Once the stick was created, Shiro tugged a small wire, retrieving the nanobot from Aram's body while she healed herself. Even though they were a bit slow on the retrieval, it didn't seem like the system had created any changes, so they had nothing to worry about. How do you even make large things on the fly? I knew it was hard, but goodness, you really need to have a full understanding of what you want to make, huh? Aram said as she struggled to make a tiny stick. Never mind trying to make a gun like Shiro. What can I say? I have an amazing memory. Shiro chuckled. Now that she had 3 samples in front of her, a normal one from Aram, destructive one from her, and a creation one from the mysterious woman, Shiro activated Analysis EX and checked the similarities. Anything that was common through all 3 would most likely be used for the base nanobot, while anything extra could be variables brought by the creators. Once she found most of the similarities, she observed the extra parts. For Aram's nanobots, the structure seems to be more rigid and stable, but not as adaptable compared to mine and the creation ones. Since this was her first creation, she wanted to make sure it takes shape rather than adaptability. Had she chosen to keep some nanobots, she could probably make quite a few items in the future, but they won't be easily transformed to anything else. Her nanobots are pretty much one-time use. Shiro thought to herself before glancing at the nanobots created using creation. If she was being honest, compared to destruction, the creation nanobots seemed a lot scarier. Everything added to it was for the benefit of assimilating everything and anything. Turn everything into creation energy. It didn't matter if it was living or dead. Everything was welcome to be assimilated. If a person dies to destruction, they are wiped out in one go before being recycled into energy for the universe or the caster. As for creation, it molds everything for the benefit of creation. It's almost like a strange hive mind that wouldn't let you reincarnate or be recycled. A perfect example would be the souls that are used for the armor. Thinking to herself, Shiro figured that she could probably emulate the creation nanobots to some degree. Now that she understood what parts are needed for the creation nanobots, it was a small matter to recreate them. With her mastery over nanobots, removing the parts that were heavily influenced by creation was possible, though it would also decrease her powers by a lot, especially considering the fact that her main class of nanotech goddess was based off of her destruction-type nanobots. Glancing at her secondary class, Shiro narrowed her eyes. All right, I think I have a plan. While we're waiting for Nantian to come over, I think I should try advance my second class so it matches my main class. The power may be lacking, but it's a step towards the right direction. Shiro grinned. Though of course I'll be making a few minor changes considering the fact that I don't like the creation-based nanobots. I'll add some parts of destruction into it with the help of a notebook left by an old friend of mine. I won't infuse that much destruction, but just make it so that the soul is purified then recycled rather than stored then used. Shiro explained as she stood up and made a clearing in the middle of the room. Appearing beside her, Nimue had a blank expression on her face. Heiss, I'll keep your body intact. Even with Jormungandr's help there will still be strain on you. I suggest you incorporate the nanobots inside your body to help your progression, otherwise they might just kill you halfway through. Nimue sighed heavily as Shiro gave her a thumbs up. Don't worry, I know. I'll also be counting on error since I plan to do something with the source codes of these nanobots. Shiro chuckled. Carving Jormungandr's crest on the floor, she channeled the mana through the room and started to manipulate the nanobots. Snapping her fingers, she started to move the room to the top of the tower so that she could use a few special features of her tower. Arriving on the roof of the tower, Shiro took a deep breath and gestured for Aram to stand back. I'll keep my spell prepared in case anything goes wrong, okay? Nodding her head, Shiro waved her finger and undid the seal within her body. Immediately, a sword pierced her chest, causing her to cough up blood. More blades started to appear one after the other, but Shiro ignored the pain and slammed her hand down. A magic array started to light up around her as several buildings around Asharia started to transform into small towers that hummed with power. Extracting the mana out of her body, Shiro activated Error, and her arm turned black with red circuits. You know what to do, don't you, Error? Shiro smiled as Error nodded his head. You only have a short moment. Once that moment has passed, you'll lose control of my power again, so try fit everything in that moment. Error warned as Shiro nodded her head. Closing her eyes, she allowed the circuits expand across her body as she summoned Iriel with her left hand. Stabbing it into the ground, a pulse of green energy exploded out, slowing down the time within the area. Using this moment, Shiro plunged her right hand into her chest. Circuits started to latch onto the nanotech blades that were trying to kill her. Activating Analysis X, Shiro scanned the nanobots and managed to find the source code she wanted to change. For elements like creation and destruction, compatibility with the caster plays a big part. In addition to this, pure creation has to be offset by pure destruction or else it never works. By inserting some aspects of destruction within the code of these nanobots, it strips them of the pure creation and, in theory, should allow Shiro to survive. Right now, she was in a state where she is not pure destruction, so using pure creation would cause the balance to be tipped. That is why her simulated creation energy achieved with Error worked as it balanced out with her innate nature. There's also the problem of compatibility. Once Shiro realized how creation worked through these nanobots, she knew that she would have low compatibility. There were very few she would wish upon the fate of never reincarnating, as most of the enemies she killed would still be allowed to reincarnate. How should I edit this? Shiro thought to herself, as she didn't want to introduce too much destruction element into the code. Visualizing what she thinks about creation, Shiro wanted to rewrite it so that it's more forgiving rather than being worse than destruction. To her, creation should be something that purifies but does not assimilate. It should be forgiving, purifying the soul so that they can have a second chance at life, something that should allow them a chance at redemption, a warm energy to counter the cold destruction that she possesses. Creation should be akin to a mother's warm embrace, something to wipe away the sins and give one comfort. Opening her eyes, Shiro took a deep breath and started to adjust the course code. The creation-type nanobots should of course retain their attack power, but they will now attempt to purify the soul. Should the target earnestly wish for a second chance at life and do good, they would then heal them. To embrace her idea version of creation would be to give anyone and everyone a second chance. However, just as she was about to finish her adjustments, an illusionary figure appeared in front of her. A familiar face that belonged to someone who has committed countless crimes and treated human life like it was nothing. Ikari. Could she give him a second chance? Hell no. Feeling the rejection of the creation nanobots, Shiro understood that to properly use these nanobots, she had to forgive Ikari and be willing to give him a second chance. That's what was required of her should she wish to master her ideal version of creation energy. Gritting her teeth, Shiro was forced on her knees as Aram was about to cast her spell, but Shiro waved her hand. Don't. I've got it handled, she shouted out. Are you sure? It doesn't look handled, Aram shouted back, but Shiro didn't respond. Closing her eyes, she dived into her mana realm where Error was helping Nimue keep everything intact. I know what you're thinking, and you should get to it quickly. You should find it in the deepest parts recovering, Nimue called out as Shiro nodded. Diving down, she passed the continents that represent her attunements. In the distance, she could see an orb of light, pulsing wildly as it started to resonate with the creation energy that was running through her body. Currently, the orb of light was sitting above Shiro's soul sword. Sylvanis, Shiro shouted out as the orb flew toward Shiro. It's a little early, but I think you should like this. Shiro smiled. Opening her eyes, she raised her left arm and summoned her incomplete soul sword that was now wrapped with a white energy instead of black. Taking a deep breath, she decided to use Sylvanis as a medium for the creation energy. Sylvanis was still a young weapon spirit, so it had the capacity to forgive, something that resonated with her ideal version of creation. With Iriel acting as the blade of destruction, Sylvanis would now act as a blade of creation, a blade that will grant you salvation and redemption. Stabbing her soul sword down, Shiro gritted her teeth and ripped out the nanobots that was trying to tear her apart. Placing it on top of the blade, she channeled Jormungandr's energy into the sword in order for the two to fuse. ####. After recovering from Shiro's stunt last time, Jormungandr was finally allowed to rest. After bidding farewell to his mother, he had enjoyed his time being free from stress. However, a bad feeling appeared in his heart as Loki knocked on his door. You might need to borrow my lap again. Loki chuckled as Jormungandr tilted his head. Suddenly, he felt an unrelenting suction force, draining him of all his energy as tears threatened to spill out from his eyes. Mother, I don't want the contract with her anymore, Jormungandr cried out as Loki patted his head while watching what Shiro was doing in interest. For her to create something such as a blade of creation in the realm of destruction, the energy needed was exorbitant. Even with Jormungandr's help, it was almost impossible. However, to her surprise, she noticed a figure that started to open a portal. The ruler of the beyond, Yuri. Waving her hand, the mana within the realm of the beyond poured into space around Asharia as she closed her eyes and waited for the promised time. Shiro had promised her help in the future. Giving her some or the realm's mana was a small price. Looking at the blade in front of her, Shiro curled her lips into a smile as she was bombarded with notifications about her creation. Hovering in the air in front of her, Sylvanis hovered. Her body was now completely made of light. As for its shape, it was the same as Iriel since that was her natural form. Sylvanis has been fused. You're the soul sword. Please give the sword a name. A single word appeared in Shiro's mind as it pretty much summarizes what creation is to her. Vinri, a word in Arya that represents second chances. Vinri, judgment blade of the creator, chaos. A blade formed from the fusion of a young sword spirit and the soul sword of the destroyer. While the soul sword represents destruction, the intent was the opposite. Infused with the power of creation, this blade that represented creation was born in the world of destruction. Passive skills. This blade cannot be destroyed so long as Shiro lives. This blade has no level. This blade suppresses the elements of destruction. This blade inflicts 5% of all damage as creation element. No form of healing using the destruction element will work and suppresses the one injured by this blade. While wielding this blade, you have a 50% resistance to creation energy. While wielding this blade, you are able to transform your enemy's mana and any forms of energy into creation energy that you can use. This includes life force. By stabbing this blade into your opponent and restricting them, you are able to convert them into creation energy. Unsheathing this blade causes fear to anyone who uses destruction energy and reverence from anyone who uses creation energy. Demigods have a slight resistance, but anyone below that rank succumbs to this effect. This blade can be used as a medium for casting creation-based spells. You can choose to redeem anyone who is slain by this blade, purifying their soul and allowing them to reincarnate sooner. You can also choose to assimilate them, and their soul is burned away to fuel your attacks. As your soul sword was used in the making of this blade, changes to your soul, class, and divinity will affect this blade. Active skill, Vinri. Effect 1. When activated, you infuse yourself with the power of creation, doubling your stats, and makes it easier for you to cast creation spells. Anyone slain, while this effect is activated, will have all of their power transferred to you for the duration. Duration, 10 minutes. Cooldown 1 day. Effect 2. When activated, you deploy a creation domain, suppressing all destruction element by 80%. In this domain, while increasing the energy needed by 20%, destruction spells have a 50% chance to fail and the energy used be transferred to you. Duration, 5 minutes. Cooldown 1 day. Effect 3. You are able to draw power from the universe of creation with each strike, bolstering your attack power by 10%. All wounds caused by this effect will have a corrosive effect on those that belong to the side of destruction. Cost, 2% of energy from the pool of assimilated souls. Cooldown, not applicable. Effect 4. You can infuse any element, except destruction, into this blade, and it'll be enhanced with creation energy, granting it additional properties. 500% increase in power against destruction, minus 80% in power against creation. Cost, 10% of energy from the pool of assimilated souls / 20% of divine energy. Duration, 10 minutes. Cooldown, 1 hour. Effect 5. Activates upon taking lethal damage, burns all of the assimilated souls to revive you to peak condition. Effect 6. This sword is bound to you and can be summoned / resummoned at will. Looking at the description, Shiro curled her lips into a grin. How does it feel? She asked as the blade hovered to her side. A little weirder than before, but better than not having a body. A feminine voice rang out as Iriel raised his non-existent eyebrows. What are you looking at? Bloody body snatcher. Vinri huffed as Iriel felt slandered. If anything, Shiro was the one who went ahead with the decision. Why she blaming him? Shaking his head / blade. Iriel figured it was probably better for him to stay silent for now. Haha, don't blame him too much. It was me who went through with the plan. Shiro laughed as she tried to pacify Vinri. Crossing her non-existent arms, Vinri transformed into a stream of white energy that flowed into Shiro's body. Dismissing Iriel as well, Shiro glanced at the last few notifications as they were the most important. With her soul sword now being fused with creation energy, it was only natural that her second class would undergo some chances. Currently, her class and level had been upgraded to the following. Shiro LVL 1000 Creation Demigoddess of Redemption. Due to the fact that it was her sword that got most of the upgrade, she was only demigoddess in name. She still wasn't a proper demigoddess for the creation element, so it was still risky to even use a small portion of her destruction element. However, now that Vinri was here to channel creation element when she's summoned, she could use more of Iriel's power so long as she used both at the same time. After all, if the balance was tipped, she would cause a rather bad explosion that had a high chance of killing her. However, there was a strange notification mixed into the pile. Due to the absence of administrators, the system cannot grant you rewards on your monumental achievement. The reward will be decided on once the issue has been resolved. Reading this, Shiro furrowed her brows and wondered what might be happening to the administrators. Shaking her head, She decided to focus on other tasks for now since she couldn't do anything even if something did happen to them. Shaking her head, she looked to her side and saw Aram sitting on the ground with her mouth open in shock. Is something wrong? Shiro blinked her eyes as Aram said nothing except writing down what the system had just broadcasted. A demigod with the power of creation has appeared in this universe. Should one fulfill hidden conditions, the essence of creation will also be bestowed to them. Blinking her eyes, Shiro was also speechless. This could either be very good or very bad. Good as in we might reach an equilibrium between creation and destruction, which could mean you being able to master both. Or it could be very bad as in this might allow our enemies to come to our world a lot easier. We barely know anything about them, but they seem quite informed of us. Aram said as Shiro tapped her chin. Yeah, this is rather bad. I might have caused a slight oopsie with this one. Shiro scratched her head. Teleporting near them, Nantian appeared with Aoi, the puppetry queen, beside him and had a confused expression on his face. What did I miss during the last few moments? I felt a spike in mana, then apparently creation is accessible in our universe now. Nantian asked as Shiro started to explain what she just did. So, you managed to make a sort of creation using the soul of Sylvanis, who is now known as Vinri, and by doing so, you allowed creation to have a foothold in our world, and it could mean our enemies having an easier time invading while we know nothing about them. Nantian repeated as Shiro shrugged. More or less. Massaging his eyes, Nantian thought about things for a moment before opening his mouth. Let's focus on you improving your understanding of creation for now. I brought Aoi, who didn't mind some testing on her body, to have it reverted to what it used to be. In the meantime, I will talk to Hemera a bit more and find out what's going on in the realm of gods, and find out the requirements they need to fulfill before they can descend to this world. Nantian said as Shiro nodded her head. All right, I'll bring the lab back inside the tower since I'm not exactly keen on performing surgery out in the open. Waving her hand, the lab was teleported back to its original spot. ####. Taking a few deep breaths, a woman looked at the destruction around her and frowned. Killing them was not as easy as I thought. I only managed to kill 2 while the others managed to run away. She muttered in annoyance while looking at the system interface. Looking at the latest broadcast, she widened her eyes in anger. She did what? **T. Arya frowned as she started to think about what she could do. Even with all of her disagreements against Shiro, she would rather put up with Shiro than the side of creation. Biting her nails, Arya thought hard about what she could do. I've taken care of the administrators since most of them were favoring her. But now that they're not here, they can't help the system take the proper actions needed. Tisk, I'll try seal the breach for now, but dealing with Shiro will have to wait a bit later. Most of the gods are after her anyways, but that's only once they realize her identity. I doubt they'll be able to do anything to her though. Furrowing her brows, Arya eventually decided to delay her plans for a while so that she could prevent the world from being overrun by forces of creation. Her vendetta was against Shiro and Shiro alone. Having the world burn to the ground due to the forces of creation was not something she wants.